Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, a very warm welcome to today's Fireside Chat, STEM Education and Research in a Turbulent Global Landscape. This event is being organized by CII, Eastern India. Today, we have come together to hear about the disruptive effect of AI in the landscape of education, especially STEM education. Most of us are educators out here or facilitators of education. We have seen some exponential change in the field of education and research post-COVID era, right? So we had to unlearn and relearn new strategies, new concept, and we had to learn how to shape ourselves to face this new era of education. STEM education, as we know, is pivoted on very three important C's. It starts with a little child, with the first C, which is curiosity, curiosity to learn new concepts that are related to science. And then we connect it to the grown-up individual who goes on to the next C, which is a career, a meaningful career in the STEM domain. And that has to be connected via collaboration. Collaboration between the learner, the educator, the institution, the parents of the learner, and also the community as a whole. So as we look at this era of education, how disruption has occurred, we will listen to the mammoth presence of two individuals, Professor Shobik Bhattacharya and Professor Debojyoti Banerjee, who will take us through their journey of 3 decades, how they have seen the change, and how we must all prepare to this new world. As we begin today's program, I will call upon Shri Pradeep Agarwal, CEO of the Heritage Group of Institution, to give his welcome address. Sir, over to you.
Good afternoon to our distinguished speakers, faculty members, and colleagues from industry and academia. A very happy new year to all of you. It's a pleasure to welcome you at the Heritage Institute of Technology for this fire chat on STEM education and research in a turbulent global landscape. Few moments demand reflection as ardently as this one, when geopolitics and development are colliding on a global scale. Today, engineering and STEM education face both unprecedented challenges and opportunities. Artificial intelligence is transforming how knowledge is created and applied. Geopolitics is reshaping research collaboration, whereas mobility and funding priorities worldwide are undergoing deep realignments. In such a moment, we must ask the hard but necessary questions. Are we teaching what the future truly needs? Are we building systems that nurture long-term research excellence? And most importantly, are we positioning India or repositioning India, especially Eastern India, to lead rather than to follow? The global context, even in 2025, remains sobering. Nearly 25% of the STEM workforce in the United States is of Indian origin. This is a testament to the quality of Indian talent, but also a reminder that much of our best human capital is absorbed abroad. All the same time, India's R&D expenditure stands at just 0.64% of the GDP, while 2 to 4% in all the developed countries. The gap is only financial, not only financial, it reflects differences in institutional depth, industry participation, and long-term vision. When we are talking about India 2047, I think we have to emerge, we have to enhance our research capability, and the country has to allocate more funds towards research so that our youth should be attracted towards the STEM education. Another structural changes we must confront is our long-standing emphasis on software-led growth. While IT and digital services have powered India's economic rise, this focus has often come to at the cost of core engineering disciplines, be it mechanical, electrical, chemical, civil, or manufacturing. The result is visible today. India has extraordinary software talent, yet remains behind in hardware ecosystem, advanced manufacturing, semiconductors, energy systems, and deep tech infrastructure. This imbalance cannot sustain a technology-driven economy in the long term. As you are all aware, that last 2 years enrollment in core engineering is very less. We need to understand, we need to evolve that China is why is scaling high because of the manufacturing, highest manufacturing capacity of the world is China. So we must introduce, like we are trying to take over like semiconductor and other manufacturing industries. ISRO is doing a lot. So we have just trying, but we need to scale up. So this is the high time that we must listen. We need to understand where we are going. We need to maybe restructure the curriculum relevance from interdisciplinary to global rankings, institutional leadership, and how AI can be meaningfully integrated into our legacy research ecosystem. Today's fireside chat will take on questions that don't have easy answers, but can no longer be ignored. And importantly, we will approach these issues from an Eastern India perspective, a region rich in talent, yet still underserved when it comes to top-tier private STEM educations and institutions, large-scale research ecosystem. I hope today's dialogue sparks reflection, debate, and most importantly, action. But the future of STEM education in India will not be shaped by policy documents alone, but by conversations like this and by the courage to rethink what we have taken for granted. Thank you, and I wish you all an engaging and thought-provoking sessions.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind address. Now we'll go on to a fireside chat, and it will be an exciting and interesting one, I promise you, because we are going to travel from the classrooms of IIT Kharagpur to the research labs of Texas A&M, then towards UCLA, and finally towards building mammoth institutions like the Jadavpur University and being a leader in it and building BITS, all 4 campuses, Pilani, Goa, Dubai, and Hyderabad. So we'll be doing all of that, a very exciting journey. Before that, I would like to call upon stage our speakers for the day, Professor Shobhik Bhattacharya and Professor Debojyoti Banerjee. Please, you're welcome on stage. Come on, join us. I would request our principal, sir, Professor Bashar Chaudhary, to please come on stage for the felicitation ceremony, and CEO, Heritage Group of Institutions, Sri Pradeep Agarwal, to do the honors. Big round of applause, please. Thank you so much for the warm felicitation session here. Professor Shobhi Bhattacharya, we all know, Principal Advisor for the Heritage Group of Institutions. He has returned to IIT Kharagpur in 1991 after his PhD and postdoc stint at Texas A&M, an institution considered across multiple universities over 15 years. He has served as the Vice Chancellor of Jadavpur University and BITS. He brings strategic insights into academic leadership and transformation. You'll also be listening to Professor Debojyoti Banerjee has joined us. He's Professor of Mechanical Engineering and James J. Kane 51 Faculty Fellow at Texas A&M and an IIT Kharagpur Distinguished Alumnus Award winner. Led professional teams for commercializing advanced technology platforms involving MEMS, microfluidics, nano manufacturing platforms, biotechnology, and thermofluids, with research focus in enhanced cooling on nanostructured surfaces. He has experience in AI and engineering ethics, exemplifying Indian engineering talent's global impact. We are eagerly waiting to listen to both of you have a chat. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Moshiki. Good evening, good afternoon. Thanks for coming over. This is quite emotional for me, but we'll try to do a sort of professional job. It's a professional event, but it's a very informal conversation, fireside chat. So we will be informal. We'll be addressing each other informally, and the bad news to start with. Our CEO, Mr. Pradeep Agarwal, has pretty much, exhausted our contents. That was brilliant, the whole presentation, but it almost touched upon everything that we wanted to discuss. So we'll see how we can live edit things. I think Moshiki also introduced very nicely. Thank you so much, Pradeep and Moshiki. And I would like to thank CII, the entire CII team, where Pradeep, of course, is the leadership, and of course Heritage, the Heritage leadership for giving us this platform. I call it a full circle from classroom to continents. It's a long connect. 34 years if we connect, if we calculate accurately. So it's a 34-year conversation, so to speak. And this was spring 1992, just about this month. Yeah. This was my second semester at IIT Kharagpur after I returned. And the first semester I joined late after the semester started. So I was given a tutorial class in heat transfer. I didn't get a full course because the teaching had started. And the second semester I got a elective. And this was for final year students, final semester students, 8th semester students. He was Dr. Debojyoti Banerjee. So Debojyoti was in that classroom. And what do you remember of that semester? We'll come to that maybe if we have time. And 34 years later, here we are. He has gone on to become a very distinguished academic across many shores, many institutions, the river Mississippi to the California shores to the Texas A&M large system. Yeah, Brazil and Goa. We'll talk about that. Yeah, how Brazil and Goa, both kind of hip hop. And so that means he graduated in 1992, BTech in Mechanical Engineering from IIT Kharagpur, with the best mechanical engineering student award also, which was given in the convocation, I believe. Here's a long list of accolades. I won't get into that, obviously. But in 2016, in our community of mechanical engineering, this is considered to be the highest sort of recognition. He became an ASME fellow. which is quite ambitious, quite coveted. And I was a faculty at IIT Kharagpur for 3 decades. So these two institutions will come back and forth in our conversation. IIT Kharagpur and Texas A&M, more of Texas A&M because that's where Devajyoti is for so many years now. And I got into institution building since 2012. Before that, it was all teaching research and so on. Devajyoti is an IIT KGP Distinguished Alumnus Awardee. I was fortunate enough to get a similar equivalent thing from Texas A&M back in 2023. So our two roads kind of diverged after 1992. I stayed back in India, I remained in India, and Devajyoti went on to do grad school in the US and went on to stay there as doing fantastic teaching and research in Texas A&M. So today we reunite, not for nostalgia, but actually I don't mind a little bit of that. But that aside, we want to confront the hardest questions in engineering education. We don't spend so much on AI. It seems to be sweeping everything. There's so many other important things. We'll try to address some of those. AI will be one, but not everything. It's not going to be influencing all an entire conversation. We will talk about, it's mentioned already, geopolitics reshaping collaboration, internationalization. AI, of course, is rewriting every rule book, as has been mentioned already. Our brightest minds are abandoning core engineering for computer science and related areas. These are issues that are bothering us, bothering the economy, bothering. This is a global issue, if I understand correctly. Devajyoti will correct me when he responds. Uh, we are producing world-class engineers, surely, may not be all of them, but some fraction of it. But we are struggling to create or nurture world-class institutions in this country. So it's a bit of a clash there. This is not going to be a lecture, as you can imagine. It's a conversation between one's mentor and mentee, not anymore, I think, and between two generations, of course. So Devajyoti, welcome, formally welcome you to this conversation. Let's talk about what changed, what didn't, and what should have changed here, or should change now. Any initial comments from you now? You can have this one. You can use this one. Yeah. Hopefully it's working. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, first of all, I would like to, start by saying that I'm deeply honored, to share the dais with my professor, my master Moshai. So what was my final semester was his first semester at IIT Kharagpur. So we share a deep bond there, and we have collaborated over the years. And also, it's very humbling to be have the opportunity to be in the company of you all. And also the thought came to my mind that my mom would be so proud if she were present here today. So thanks for all the accolades and the great introduction. And also, wanted to express my gratitude for giving me the opportunity to share my mind here, and also to have a joint brainstorming on important issues, facing on an international scale, not just, national scale or a local scale. But at the end of the day, I think the writing on the wall is, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which is the word is my family. And it is definitely very true of, universities. People don't recognize that universities have a global footprint. We tend to think that students are our customers, but that's a wrong model to think about. And we often think on only like, universities being in the service of the nation, which is true. But universities also have a global impact and a global outreach, or how do I put it, a global scale operation. And that's often not recognized. So if you take any educational institution, whether it's at the school level or at the higher education level, they have a global footprint. because even students that are graduating from high school eventually are brand ambassadors for their own culture, for their own state or their own nation. So what is being taught in the high school eventually serves as a brand ambassador role down the road. And that is also very true of higher education, whether it's at the bachelor's, master's, or PhD level, essentially. Because at the end of the day, what they are contributing is on an international scale. So with that, I would like to set the tone for the discussions today.
Very elegantly put. So let's begin. With my first question. Devajyoti, what's the most surprising transformation in your journey from that KGP, Kharagpur, we call KGP back in Kharagpur, from the KGP classroom to the distinguished academic that you are today? What's the most surprising transformation?
Yes, so graduated, got my undergraduate degree, started working in Tata Steel, had a chance interaction with a professor who happens to be senior from IIT Kharagpur, landed up in Mississippi. Eventually did PhD at UCLA and then landed up in Silicon Valley as a hiring manager in biotech companies. After working in like 2 startups and a mid-sized company and then a $1 billion footprint company. And then moving to academia after taking like a 40% pay cut. So moving to academia, I think, was a very transformative experience. Because the amount of maturity that gave me professionally and personally, I wasn't ready for it. Because running a research operation as a faculty is like running a small startup. Because you have to get your own research funding, you have to recruit the students and the postdocs to run and the research scholars to run your lab. And then also your output is measured in terms of papers and number of students that you have graduated from your research group, both as undergraduate researcher to a master's to a PhD researcher. That whole operation becomes a one-man show. And so I guess in MIT, they call it drinking from a fire hydrant, from a fire hose. So moving to academia was drinking from a fire hose, fire hydrant. And the amount of maturity that one had to get on an accelerated learning, curve, that was the most surprising transformation. And to summarize it, after I moved from Silicon Valley to academia, one of my committee members in my PhD committee, I met him at a conference and he was asking me, "Are you still in Silicon Valley?" And I told him, "No, I moved to Texas A&M." And he grabbed me, put me at one side, and he got very excited. I said, "Let me tell you, this is the best job in the world." And initially I was a little taken aback at his excitement, but it took me a year or two to realize what he was talking about, that why it is the best job. I will leave it for later in the discussion, but definitely moving to academia was a very transformative experience because of the maturity that it forced me into, both on a professional scale as well as a personal scale.
So let me repeat, running a research lab on your own is like a single founder startup. That's hard. Yeah. All right. So I have tried to frame questions in different areas. I mentioned the areas also. So that was just a loosener, the previous question. So now we'll get into core areas. So the first segment I call it research frontiers and boundary crossing. You can say discipline crossing, etc. So your work spans classical mechanical engineering, thermal fluids, and much beyond. Let me focus on that much beyond part as well. So it has moved from thermal fluids to nanotech, nanofabrication, biomed, AI, other emerging areas. Let me not list all of them. But my question is not about this list of areas. It's a more generic phenomenological question. So this discipline crossing, boundary crossing, we claim to encourage in this country. We will hear millions of seminars on this, but we rarely achieve for a variety of reasons. So my question is, what drove you across these disciplines? And more critically, I want to explore this. How Texas A&M, by the way, Texas A&M is called TAMU, TAMU, quite often popularly. How did TAMU's institutional structures, this is the part I want you to look into, how did those structures enable this? Did it facilitate? Did it support? Was it a barrier? Was it a hindrance? Like it is quite often in this country. What would have been different? So this is the part you have to sort of imagine if you had stayed in India and attempted the same. It's a long question, but you choose the part you want to respond. That's all.
So, so I'll try to keep it brief because there are so many dimensions in that question. So first of all is, what drove me to interdisciplinary research. So I think it was a little bit of serendipity because, when I graduated from UCLA, I was thinking of coming back to IIT Kharagpur as a professor. But for some reason or other, I got stuck there in US. And
So let me interrupt. I didn't mention this. So I was part of the department. I was hearing this. I was young at the lowest rung of the designations, etc. But I was hearing WT has been offered. I was very excited. Yeah, my student is coming back so early. And then I could hear murmurs that again he said we'll take it later, we'll think about it and stuff like
I
that.
said no straight.
You said no.
So, part of it was one of my professors, he advised me, he's passed away now, Professor R.C. Arora. He sent me a strong email saying like, you're making the biggest mistake of your life to go to academia right after your PhD. You should go, as an engineer, you should go work in the real world, understand how real world works. And I still remember that last line. He said that there will be a job for you at IIT Kharagpur whenever you want to come back. So that was a great emotional boost for me. And at the same time, it was also a very emotional moment for me to say no, because I was so made up in my mind to come back. And that email, completely transformed my perspective. But that's water under the bridge. But it was by serendipity that I joined this MIT startup. That was, at that time, nano wasn't a buzzword yet. Nano, the so-called four-letter word. The four-letter word at that time was MEMS, which is the grandfather of nano, microelectromechanical systems. And this MIT startup, by luck, actually, started collaborating with a company called Applied Biosystems that did the Human Genome Project. And DARPA, which is the Department of Defense funding agency in US, they like to think of themselves as the James Bond of research. If something is impossible, they like to do it. It's the mission impossible of Department of Defense. So DARPA was the first one to start a microfluidics program that was focused on biotech. And before that, I didn't have any experience in biotech. But again, it was drinking from the fire hydrant because there was this contract that came from DARPA to this MIT startup I was working for at that time called Coventor, which is part of Lam Research now. They are mostly in microelectronics, not as much in MEMS now. But at that time, there was a lot of excitement over Human Genome Project going on, a lot of excitement of shrinking the whole analytical chemistry lab on a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter chip. And DARPA was the first one to start a microfluidics program that was focused on biotech. And so that's how I started, in biotech, because until then my master's work was on aerospace applications. My PhD work was on nuclear safety applications. I didn't really have any foray into biotech at that point, but all of a sudden I'm now being pushed into, I had to, because that's the contract we had to do. And so I started interacting a lot with bioassay people. And so I had this very wide array of experience, thanks to Professor Arora for suggesting that I should get some industry experience, because if I look back on it, and if I did not do that industry experience, I wouldn't have the intellectual muscle to be able to jump from, into these interdisciplinary topics. So I think listen to your professors, that's the moral of the story. But so that actually, introduced me to this whole learning process of starting something new. that is outside of your comfort zone. And how do you, it showed me the process of starting new topics in my research lab. So, eventually MEMS became nano, nano became AI. And so once I learned the process of learning, and that's what we try to teach to our students. If I look back on it, when I started in mechanical engineering, we used to do engineering drawing using T-squares and French cards. We didn't use Excel spreadsheets. We used to make the tables by calculating on a calculator and entering the tables by hand, which students, even in high school these days, they're using spreadsheets. As an engineering student, the first time I used a spreadsheet was when I was in Tata Steel. As a management trainee, we were going through the training course and we had a teacher teach us how to use spreadsheets, which high school students are using now. So what we are teaching the students now, 20 years from now, will be obsolete. So what we try to tell our students is we are not only teaching you the domain knowledge, but we are also teaching you as to how to learn things. Because many of the things that you are learning today will be obsolete because of the technology advancements down the road. So learning, the process of learning is I think the crucial part. So to get back to your question, how did I get into interdisciplinary research? How did I move and then into engineering ethics and so on? A big part of it was, because of the industry experience and learning how to start a brand new program, while working with interdisciplinary teams. And then finally, when I joined Applied Biosystems and became a hiring manager also, there also the same process started repeating. And I'll get into those details a little later. But that was the first part. I forget what the other part was.
How Texas A&M's ecosystem.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate because Texas A&M was the only place I had applied while I was working in Silicon Valley. And the credit goes to my PhD advisor, Professor Vijay Dhir. So, I graduated from UCLA. I was working in Silicon Valley. My research received the Best Paper Award from American Society for Mechanical Engineers. And so at the award ceremony dinner, I was telling Professor Dhir that eventually I would like to come back to academia. And he said, hey, Texas A&M called me. They were asking if I would like to recommend somebody, so I can recommend you and you can apply. And so without knowing anything about Texas A&M, I applied and I forgot. And then a few months later, I got a phone call from them asking me if I would like to come for a job interview. And so, well, I'm doing a little bit of bragging and marketing for my current employer, so please forgive me for doing it. But Texas A&M Engineering right now has the highest research expenditure in US, more than that of MIT, our engineering school I'm talking about. And the university system as a whole has more than $1 billion in research expenditure. That happened only a few years ago.
If I'm not mistaken, MIT's rank is around 25 plus in total research expenditure. There are big, because it's unfair to do this ranking also because there are bigger systems. In the state universities are bigger systems. Wisconsin, etc. They have much bigger expenditure numbers,
Right.
but their academic ranking isn't that high.
Right, and you should take all this ranking business with a pinch of salt. I can talk about it for an hour, but but I think at the end of the day, you can look at concrete numbers, and then a lot of the ranking is also based on people's impression. And but that aside, so A&M actually is a huge research engine. In fact, talking about the ecosystem, we have a faculty senate that typically talks about all the academic issues. What are the course syllabi? How the syllabi needs to be modified. If a new AI course is offered, should computer science teach it, or statistics teach it, or business school teach it, and so that people are not stepping on each other's toes. So that's the role of faculty senate. But we also have another organization on campus called Council of Principal Investigators, or CPI. Anybody who has a research grant, extramural research grant in the last 3 years, is a member of that organization. And the whole role of that organization is to get together, communicate with each other, figure out where it is pinching the shoe, where the research enterprise could be more efficient. And that organization actually makes recommendations to the chancellor, to the president, the vice president, research, provost, and so on, as to how to make the research enterprise more efficient. And so accidentally, I got elected to be the chair of CPI for a few years, and it was a great learning experience for me because
It was not accident.
it's a long story. So I wasn't anticipating that role, but it happened essentially. So I didn't even campaign. But anyway, so somehow I got elected, and so I had the chance to sit in, face to face with the chancellor, sit face to face with the president once a month, with the vice president, research 3 times a month, and that actually opened up my, viewpoint, my horizon to all the interdisciplinary research that's happening on campus.
Exposure to the leadership. Let me also mention this. They are unlike, let's say, IIT Kharagpur, all the full professors are members of the Senate. It's not like that in Texas A&M. It's a very exclusive few who get into the Senate. So the Vijati, for whatever good reason, I'm sure it's the right reason, he is part of the Senate today.
So I was a fourth term faculty senator actually, but this year I didn't. I thought I did enough of my service to the university, but this time I didn't go up for.
So I'm taking that the Texas A&M ecosystem was a very positive,
Yes, so
supporting influence.
yeah, it's a huge research engine.
Yeah.
You name a topic, somebody is doing it. And sometimes I got into research topics by accident. So for example, there was a faculty senate, subcommittee meeting, and somebody was sitting right next to me, and we were exchanging notes. And I asked, which school are you in? I'm in law school. Where are you? I'm in engineering. What do you teach? I teach legal ethics. What do you teach? I teach engineering ethics. And that conversation led to an NSF grant on ethics of AI, on ethics in STEM. It's ethics in research. And I became a glorified PhD student of my PI, Susan Fortney, because Susan, being a lawyer, I side of engineering, and I think that's where the we should be thinking of our curriculum, because typically we train our engineering students into the hard side of engineering. We train them to take a differential equation and solve it to the third decimal place. But when they're in the real world, they have to manage people, they have to manage budgets, they have to manage hiring. And that's where the ethical issues come up. And if we can train them in the soft skills, that's the difference between somebody getting double the salary.
Right.
So that's like a utilitarian argument, of course, in engineering ethics. But there's a duty ethics side of it also. But at the end of the day, my message is, I think the new generation of engineers that we are graduating, we should probably emphasize more of the soft skills. And I think if you look at other professions like legal or medical, I think developing the soft skills is a part of the curriculum. My brother is a doctor, he's here in the audience. I think he will agree with me, because in medical curriculum, there is a lot of emphasis on treatment of the patient, on how you deal with the patient, how the soft skills part. And I think in engineering right now, we are lacking that part, which even MBAs do a lot better. Business school does a lot better job than engineering. I think. Yes. So I think that probably is one big, opportunity, I would say, in engineering.
So the lesson to learn from here, to me, if it's not done already, heritage engineering students should take at least one elective from the law school, which fortunately we have within us. This lot of engineering schools won't have that opportunity. We do. So we should grab that opportunity and use it to our advantage. Let me move on to the next segment. This is a little sensitive. You respond as you wish. The geopolitical storm. It's the elephant in the room actually. So U.S. higher education, it is facing an enrollment cliff, so to speak. Plus the dramatic policy shifts on internationalization. It's really disruptive. Texas A&M is also heavily reliant on international students, particularly from India. These numbers are mind-boggling. International grad students, particularly, if not undergraduate. So there has been a 17% drop in new enrollment of international students in 25 fall, the beginning of the academic year, current academic year, which has led to something like a very current number, something like $1.1 billion revenue loss. Mind-boggling, isn't it? So it's self-inflicted, so to speak. This is the largest fall in enrollment of international students in a decade, barring the COVID time. That's an unusual phenomenon. Uh, Not just that $1.1 billion revenue loss, it will lead to 23,000 jobs as well, loss of those jobs. So, how are you responding on the ground on this? My honest assessment from someone living this. Your labs, your grad departments and grad schools. Is this a temporary political storm, or it's a structural shift?
Well, so it's hard to predict the future. So I don't know, how things will change in the future. But I think every challenge is also an opportunity. So I think, there are two major shifts that are happening internally in US. Just to talk about the US perspective. Number one, if you look at the numbers from, the engineering societies, for example. So, there's the Engineering Education Society, for example, American. Their projection is because of there is a big demographic shift that's happening in the US, that a large number of small US universities will have to go through mergers and acquisitions or close down. Because there is going to be a big drop in college enrollment within US itself. Because of demographic changes, the population in US is aging. If you look at the average age, in US it's much higher, and compared to that, India is a much younger country in terms of the average age. So that's a hard fact that you cannot ignore. So I think part of these shifts that you are seeing in the drop in the international students going to US is part of that bigger picture essentially. But so the opportunity there is, a lot of these universities that have realized that they are not going to get as many domestic students will actually have to, open up to get more international students to survive. And I think that's a big opportunity for students in India, essentially. But how the future will turn out, I don't really know.
But it's a concern, definitely.
It's a concern. But there are 4 or 5 states that are actually in a very comfortable position, which are not going to face this, demographic cliff, so to speak. So Texas actually happens to be one of them, where college enrollment is, projected to grow. The other ones are, I think, Florida, Massachusetts, California, and I'm missing, I think, but it's probably New York, New Jersey area.
But it has nothing to do with its Republican stance.
No, nothing with that essentially. It's just the nature of the population movement and the demographic, changes essentially.
So with this in perspective, when a bright Indian student sitting in India, finishing undergraduate,
Right.
approaches you and would you recommend that, yeah, come over to Texas A&M or US, study here, or would you say, hey, with these complexities, these uncertainties, concerns around, we don't know what the future is going to be. Would you say that, in India you also have chaos too, but at least the biryani and the weather, those are better. So what would you recommend?
Yeah, so things have shifted quite a bit since I was an international student in US. Um, so yeah, and students come in all shapes and sizes, with all different aspirations. And the situation in India is also very different now compared to 30, 40 years ago, because there is a big startup culture now in India, essentially. There is a lot of emphasis on research commercialization, to the extent many of the institutions are even offering startup funds for faculty and students to start their own companies at the point they're about to graduate. So that shift in mindset creates lots of different opportunities. So depending on how the student wants to build their career, if they're thinking of a academic career, I would definitely suggest to them to go out and see the world, as Swami Vivekananda probably professed. And I think he also went to US with the different objectives in mind, not just generally for for making it a religious sort of motive. It was more than religion that was guiding him to go there. And so similarly, the students these days probably should, think about what is it that is motivating them for higher studies and decide accordingly, because there's a lot of opportunity in India now. But if somebody is very startup minded, then network is the key to success. And the bigger network you have and the more channels you have to, to, to broadcast your message and to, gather, you fish out your customers, the more successful you are likely to be. And so in that respect, I would say, depending on what their motives are, US definitely, going to US for higher studies definitely has values, depending on where they want to end up, 10, 20 years down the road. So if they're thinking of a faculty job, or if they're thinking of, doing startups or unicorns, um, you know, going to US definitely broadens their network, gives them that outlook, gives them the different dimensions on how academia and research works. So if they want to come back to India, that probably makes them more effective. But that gives them the opportunity to work in national labs, post graduation or during their graduate studies itself in engineering. They can go do an internship in a national lab. For example, Los Alamos, was instrumental in the nuclear program and the atom bomb in US. I mean, if you watch Oppenheimer, the movie, you get the essence of how things evolved in national labs. Or you go work in a solar energy lab, or you work in a naval research lab, or in a maritime research lab, for example. Yes. So there are so many different opportunities to understand how the research ecosystem works on the international level, because that's the depth of knowledge that you bring back if you do decide to come back to India. So there's definitely value to doing higher studies in US. But at the same time, you recognize that there's a lot of different dimensions in India also. So depending on what their personal constraints, economic constraints, professional aspirations are, I think both countries have more opportunities now than 30, 40 years ago.
Unfortunately, we don't have students in the audience. This would have been useful to them. I forgot to mention that this is not a one-way street. Me asking questions, and Devajyoti is free to ask any question. Hopefully, I know the answer. But that is.
Yeah, so if I can follow up on that.
You didn't have to grab so soon, but go ahead, please.
So yeah, I think if I look at the Indian startup ecosystem, BITS Pilani alums are actually have started the highest number of unicorns.
15, 16, I think.
Yes, more than any of the other IITs or IIC, and
16 unicorns. That means the valuation of each of these is more than $1 billion.
So and that's an amazing fact. And I keep on wondering, what's the secret sauce of engineering education in BITS Pilani, engineering system that generates so many successful startup founders and unicorns. Your thoughts on that?
How much time do we have? Okay, very briefly, it's not big talk and things like that. You got to have structured support system. So first of all, you got to have incubation center, the so-called TBIs, Technology Business Incubators, which is like DST going to be disappearing, has disappeared, ANRF. So DST used to fund, even in private systems, which is one of them, to create TBIs. Now, what do we do there? You give a little space, a cubicle, you give internet, you give a telephone. You don't need to give telephone anymore. So things like that. But in addition to that, you give technology support. You give access to, for example, the Goa campus, BITS Goa. They have wet lab, completely exclusively done for prepared or created for the startups, not for regular students. Regular students can access it, but it's primarily the priority booking for those labs, heavily equipped wet lab for the startups, for the founders and co-founders and their employees, researchers and scientists. But you also create a non-technical support system. This is very, very robust. You also give curricular support. I'll give you an example very quickly. So BITS offers a course called NVC. It's going on for the last 30 years, maybe 20 years here. NVC, New Venture Creation. Now, this course is not taught by a faculty member. And this is generally true. I try to tell people in IIT Kharagpur, but not everybody listen to it. Faculty members are not the best mentors or trainers for startups. There may be one or two exceptional individuals. Those are fine. But in general, somebody is assigned to teach entrepreneurship course. It doesn't work. Let us. The faculty members are excellent in something else. So new venture creation is actually taught by over the years. It's very popular. It's very competitive to get in. It is taught by founders and co-founders, VCs, venture capitalists, and the mentors of startups. But those are full-time professionals in this. So fortunately, BITS leverages on the alumni network. It has a fantastic alumni network. Those who are available online, offline, everything. And I'll give you one statistic. 60% of those who enroll in this is just an elective. It's a 4 credit or something elective. 60% of the students end up becoming a founder or co-founder in real life. That's a fantastic statistic. I haven't seen anything like this anywhere in Indian higher education institutions. You provide very specific professional support on finance, on regulatory matters, on legal matters, on physical, various other things, and mental support, and so on. It's a very wonderful. I remember some 60. This is slightly aged and slightly dated information. 60 organizations in these non-technical areas who have actively engaged with BITS. So you spend money. You obviously rope in these support systems. You work on scale. So there are a number of unless you invest, you don't get a return. So that's the thing. But then the other thing, which is not a very nice thing to talk about, is very controversial. So BITS Pilani has a zero attendance policy officially. You cannot attend any class whatsoever and still graduate. So people who do not like certain lecture, they stay back in the. So to do, I must mention this, to do serious entrepreneurship, startup culture, a residential structure is essentially helpful. Commuting system won't give you enough time. So people would stay in the dorms, in the hostels, and actually ideate. So I have seen fantastic ideations. Those who are in second year, sometimes the teams, founders and co-founders, they have been across various years. Some third years, maybe 1/4 year, couple of second years, typically not first year. But some of them are fantastic companies today. Some of them are unicorns. One day a guy came over and let me share this story. I don't know time. So he just brought a school science book, class 9 science. You have sketches and stuff like that. You open the magnetism chapter, you have this iron filings and then the magnet, etc. So he held this mobile with an app he has created, and suddenly through the camera screen of the mobile, I see these iron filings moving toward one pole of the magnet. And he then moved to another picture. Things became immediately dynamic. Imagine the learning that happens with this from a diagram, which is a static, simple diagram, which has no impact to me as such. But these are the things, it happens in the dorms, but the institute vehemently supporting them almost with all kinds of variety. We can talk about this forever, but that's how it is. I would think that it's agile. And for a while, I felt that we were doing, when I started back in 2016 in Bitchfield, things are very nascent, very small. But when I left in 23, it was alive and kicking. And I felt that we were doing better than IIT Kharagpur. That gave me a strange feeling of, I don't know how to describe it.
Hierarchy, it's called self-actualization.
Maybe. But let me go on. Talking about the US, how do you see India from the US? How is Indian higher education, our institutions, how is it perceived by the US, by academics or whoever else in the USA? It's important to know what do they correctly perceive and what do they miss big time. Can you throw some light on it briefly?
Yes, so of course, when we are talking about Indian higher education from the US context, we are talking about from the graduate program perspective, because at that point we are evaluating students who have already gotten a bachelor's degree coming to US for a graduate, master's or PhD degree. So, and because there is so much of, how do I put it, support from international students, particularly from India, going to US and supporting the whole research enterprise there, there is actually a lot of savvy understanding of the Indian educational system that wasn't there 30 years ago. Because the recognition has come in that, the US graduate education and graduate research enterprise is heavily dependent on international students, and particularly from students from India. So because of that market drive, there is an automatic, um, drive to know about the quality of the different educational institutions in India. So, for example, I'm a member of the graduate admissions committee in my department in Texas A&M, and we actually set up a list in an Excel spreadsheet
Let me
of what are some of the premier educational institutions in India.
Devajit, let me interrupt you because I think we need to get a feel of this. Mechanical Engineering Department at Texas A&M. Let us understand the scale. Total number of undergraduate students would be about.
So yeah, right now
Roughly.
in our department, roughly it's about 1,500 undergraduate mechanical students.
And grad school is.
And so graduate students about 600, about 300 masters, 300 PhD.
Yeah.
And we have about 100 faculty. When I joined Texas A&M, 2005, 21 years ago, at that time it was 60 faculty,
So it's
maybe 800 undergraduate
fabulous growth.
students.
100 faculty members.
So we actually have doubled in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of the scale of our department, essentially. But coming back to graduate education and research, so there is an understanding that we need to recruit students from good quality educational institutions in India, and so because of that, there actually has been a lot more understanding and information now of what are the premier educational institutions. So when an applicant is applying for a
So
graduate
does it
program,
go beyond the IITs? This
it goes
perception?
beyond the IITs. So you'll be surprised to see the number of institutions listed in that spreadsheet, where if a student is applying from that particular institution,
So this is not public.
this is not public, but in the sense that
We should get a hold of this.
but in the sense that they do get a brownie points. Of course, it's a holistic evaluation. It's not just, hey, the student is from this institute, so we should get this student. But it's a combination of course, their GRE scores, their GPAs or percentages, if they have taken an English language course and so on. But recommendation letters. But also one of the things that factors into the decision is this student coming from a good quality educational institution in India that it is known for. So the quality of the educational institution definitely plays a role. And that awareness of knowledge wasn't there as much 30 years ago.
So they do research, they continue to update this sort of.
Yes, and I'm surprised because a number of students from India and of course from other institutions in other countries as well. How many of these students applying for graduate school already have a research publication? That's mind-boggling. Even students from India, or if I look at students from China or Korea or other places.
I have to tell you this story. I joined IIT Kharagpur in 91, and they would not give me a PhD student for whatever. I don't get into those dark stories. So I had to start working with third years, second years, even after my thermal class, and of course fourth years, to publish in the same journals. Later on, I published for my PhD students. So all those kids going to the US with those journal papers in pocket. So okay, okay.
So even if a student is coming from a lower ranked or a perceived to be a lower quality institution, but if that student already has a journal paper, in one of these premier journals, that student actually has a leg up, even though the institution is not that well known. So that actually, so the student's individual accomplishments actually plays a bigger role, and I think which institution they come from actually is a side item, essentially.
So absolutely. We go on to the next segment, and this is the popular one on the computer science tsunami. and also on contemporary curriculum. So this CS tsunami, we are non-CS folks, we hate it, right? Well, not really. So every Indian engineering college, it will be mind-boggling if you look at. I know I won't tell you the numbers. Manipal total CS enrollment versus typical core engineering department enrollment is absolutely mind-boggling. The gaps. Students admitted to core engineering, what do they do? I have seen this in departments like mining engineering and agricultural engineering back in Kharagpur. They are trying to spend 4 years to get out and get the IIT brand and do something else, completely orthogonal. But now every core engineering is facing this situation. These kids are spending the 4 years to pivot their whole training and thinking and whatever is choice of electives toward data science, toward CS, and toward all this AI and related areas. Um, sti- and these departments, mechanical is one, then of course the other ones, they once they had the brightest minds, you are an example. Whoever now, whoever they don't make that CS cut, they will come into this. That's how it works. Is core engineering, so looking at from the US perspective and whatever you know about India, is core engineering dying? Is it transforming? What if, now this is a concern, this is an imaginary future concern, may not be true. What if the CS AI bubble bursts? Just like the Y2K, the .com, the bubble did burst, right? Now, I don't want to sound very depressing here, but there is always a possibility. Even the best of CI, AI experts, etc., will admit that this is not ruled out. So, your take.
Yeah, there are multiple dimensions, to this issue. The first one is, when the California gold rush happened, the people who were making the spades made more money than the people who were actually discovering the gold, right? So one should take at all these hypes with a pinch of salt, and by that same metric. In fact, the CEO of NVIDIA was actually joking the other day that there is a huge demand for carpenters and electricians because AI heavily depends on data centers, and they're short of manpower for building data centers, because if AI really has to grow, they need more data centers, which means they also need more water efficient technologies and more cooling technologies. That's where all the traditional mechanical, chemical, electrical engineers come in, more energy efficiency. So ironically, for every data scientist, they probably need 5 more, traditional engineers to support that data scientist. That's one part of it. So I don't think that the story is, as bleak as it is being, thought of. There is actually, because of AI and data science, there is a huge appetite for the other engineering professions to make it more effective. Because if data centers are not going to be more water efficient or more energy efficient, it's actually going to be a big societal problem. And I think all these NVIDIAs and Intels recognize that. And they're heavily investing in traditional engineering research, because until this energy efficiency and water efficiency comes in, this is not sustainable. And they do recognize that. That's the first part. And the second part is, history keeps repeating itself. More things change, more they stay the same. So, I remember when I was a grad student and, the .com boom was happening, a lot of my friends pivoted to HTML programming, and they abandoned mechanical engineering. One of my buddies, in fact, left the lab and started his own PC company, and with another former PhD student in the lab, who used to come in as a part-time lecturer, and my buddy, who was a PhD student, they decided to help with grad school, and to help with postdoc or being a research scientist. We are going to start a PC company and pivot towards HTML programming and so on. And within 2 years, there was a .com bust. And there are early murmurs of people who are heavily into AI already saying that this AI boom is not sustainable, and AI is not delivering to all the promises that it made. And AI is effective in non-science applications, right? If it is image processing or writing a story or writing an essay, those are the type of things where AI has found its niche. But if it comes to making a computer chip more efficient, I don't think it has delivered to that promise yet. Even energy efficiency and so on, even a simple CFD program, computational fluid dynamics program, you apply AI is not, even to do simple arithmetic or differential equation solving, AI has not delivered what it promised to do. So when it comes to more like scientific applications, technical applications, I don't think AI has been that, has delivered on its promise. But if it is more on a soft skill type of, problem, yeah, definitely AI has found its niche.
I don't think all the scientific simulation models will be replaced by data-driven models. That's impossible. I mean, until that happens, AI won't be able to help. So it has to be data-driven models. But how far data-driven models have gone into deep inroads into complex simulation tools.
So if it's a repetitive job, yeah, definitely AI makes sense. But
Right.
if it's a one-off, area, I don't think AI has found its effectiveness yet. So I wouldn't call it a doomsday, but also I wouldn't. If you're placing all your eggs in one basket, students who are aspiring, to just be in AI, that's a very risky, strategy as far as your career 10, 20 years down the road.
Right.
But also I'll put one thing in perspective, and this is where US diverges from India. So for example, in Texas A&M, 5 years ago, computer science department was very selective. 500 students would apply and only 440 students would get into computer science. And right now, as of last year, the computer science jobs have shrunk considerably. And so now there is actually less number of students applying to CS in US. And they are less selective in taking CS students. So if there are 50 students applying, they're taking 45, compared to 540. That's the reality in CS departments now in US right now.
Well,
And compared to that mechanical, I'm very proud of, 600 students are applying and only probably, 200 are getting in. So mechanical actually has become more selective, at least at Texas A&M, compared to electrical or chemical or computer science.
It's interesting piece of information.
But I see a complete dichotomy in India because here it seems computer science departments have opened the doors. It's a floodgate.
But we are hearing from IT companies locally and nationally that pressure in tech is going to take a nosedive very soon. Smaller cuts now.
The horror story is somebody who has experience in CS for 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
AI tools are allowing them to do 3 jobs at the same time. Actually, there are anecdotes I'm hearing, and because of work from home, they have 3 different computers on their desk, and they're working for 3 different companies, right, at the same time. And because the AI tools have actually made them more productive. And so AI actually is a big boon for somebody who has 15 years of experience.
These companies don't know about the
other two.
Oh my God.
Because it's work from home.
Engineering ethics.
But on the other hand, what is really killing CS right now is the fresh graduates, and that's not good for the health of the CS ecosystem, because you need fresh blood to sustain that particular industry ecosystem. So if the fresh blood is hurting, and the more mature segment of that workforce is maturing, they will eventually graduate, but this fresh blood will not get the experience that they need to be more mature CS people. And so AI actually has been a boon and a curse to CS at the same time, thinking long term.
Yeah. Let me move into a bit of curriculum related insights. So we're talking about core engineering, maybe mechanical as an example. So I have been I've been a big fan of thermo. I love thermo teaching back in Kharagpur. I think I did it well over the years, many years I taught. But you always give examples of thermo as a sort of a foundation block. So are you guys still teaching thermo in these days of AI hype cycle? I mean, this is something, so today we are talking about AI, tomorrow, quantum computing is staring at us. It's going to steal the limelight from AI. how do we, the core engineering faculty, how do we morph or are we supposed to our engineering curriculum, let's say mechanical engineering as an example, uh, so that we can still remain relevant, still remain contemporary, and so on. We can make our students still stay out ahead of the curve. How do you do that? Teach them new tools, maybe, etc. Just briefly, I'm sorry, the time is not.
We are running out of time, so I'll be very brief with it. So as I mentioned earlier, when I was an engineering student, we didn't use spreadsheets, we didn't use a CAD software, we used to use T-squares and so on. Now even high school students are using spreadsheets. So I look at AI as the next spreadsheet. So let me elaborate. So if I have a mechanical engineering graduate now who only knows how to use a spreadsheet and how to do macro programming in a spreadsheet versus another mechanical engineering graduate who knows spreadsheets, knows how to do macro, but also knows how to integrate AI tools into their spreadsheet, they're definitely going to be more productive. So I look at AI as one of those tools that we need to teach our students, integrate it into an engineering curriculum. But that should not consume the engineering curriculum. That's one part of it. The second part of it is engineering became trusted by the society once engineers learned how to, learn the fundamental topics in engineering, and thermodynamics happens to be one of them. And from my own practical experience, when I was a hiring manager at Applied Biosystems, which did the Human Genome Project, became Life Technologies. Now it's like a multi-billion-dollar company as part of Thermo Fisher Scientific. At one time, I was actually hiring people for the bioassay groups, and I was also hiring people for my engineering groups. And oftentimes, we were developing new products like protein chips and DNA chips, where the engineers needed to talk to the bioassay people. And engineers have their own language, and the bioassay people have their own language. And thermodynamics was our common language to tell them where our constraints are and understand where the bioacid group's constraints were. So thermodynamics became our common language for communicating the constraints and the opportunities between the two groups. So we should not lose focus of the fundamentals, because if we lose focus of the fundamentals in our curriculum, we lose our soul. And I leave it at that. So I would still keep the fundamentals, but teach the new tools that are coming on the horizon. And then 10 years down the road, my prediction is that we would need to teach quantum computing to mechanical engineers. So it's like driving a car. When I write a spreadsheet, I don't need to know how a spreadsheet operates on the machine learning level, on the machine level, essentially, right? So similarly, if a history major is driving a car, they don't need to know how IC engine works. All they need to know is how to drive the steering and the gearbox, right? So similarly, we should look at all these new technologies that are coming in. We should integrate it into our curriculum, but more as a toolbox that the student should learn.
Excellent. Next question quickly on institution building. From my days back in Texas A&M in the late 80s, it was 37,000 students enrollment. Today it's 81,000 plus. It's a fabulous growth story. Now, whenever there is rapid growth in an organization, let alone academic institution, there is, the quality, it gets hurt. Yeah, there is a resource crunch and so on and so forth. I want to hear if there is a sort of comprehensive answer to this. How did Texas A&M do this? Because compared to those days, I think Texas A&M's research eminence has risen instead of getting impacted adversely. How did Texas A&M do this?
So yeah,
81,000 plus students today.
Yeah, there are two sides of the same coin. I think, at the same time the expansion was happening, A&M also joined the $1 billion club, because the research expenditure, exceeded $1 billion. So it was a coordinated effort, it was not a one-man show. So there was a coordination, cooperation on multiple levels and multiple teams that managed, enabled it. So if you look at higher education institutions, there are two fundamental duties they are performing. One is knowledge dissemination. The other side of it is also knowledge creation. Because the same discovery in a startup company will probably stay hidden as a trade secret. On the other hand, if the same discovery is happening in a university lab, it's actually penetrating the society a lot faster, both in terms of publications, patents, startups, and so on. And so, this huge expansion, of course, any rapid expansion, according to thermodynamics, the entropy situation is very murky, right? So, so managing that, requires a lot of skill. And I think part of it was NM ended up hiring people who had experiences, running large organizations. So our last president, actually, when I joined, Bob Gates was the president of Texas A&M, who was head of CIA under President Bush, the senior. And then the previous president we got, was also the chief of staff of Air Force, who used to give weekly,
Those of you who don't remember, Senior Bush, the president, also is the junior, senior, everybody is from Texas.
That's right, yeah, and they have a huge history in Texas and Texas A&M. But I think part of the secret sauce that made it possible was hiring people who knew how to manage large organizations. And in fact, our last president, when I was chair of CPI, at our first meeting, he came to me and he said, I know how to run large organizations. I don't know how to run research. And you as CPI are going to tell me what is needed to do. So having leaders who don't mind telling you what they don't know, I think was very effective in managing this growth. But there are challenges. I couldn't sugarcoat it, So when President, the last president, he set up a committee to look at how our growth is being managed. I was part of that committee. And we looked at the numbers. And of course, the number of professors stayed the same. The research lab space stayed the same. The classroom space stayed the same. But the number of students almost doubled in the last 10 years. And so that has created its own growth pains. And that's one of the things that Texas A&M is addressing right now, because there's a huge investment in hiring new faculty that came from the government.
So the infrastructure.
Or building the infrastructure to accommodate that growth. So there has been growth pains. It's not a rosy story.
Okay.
So there are two, as I mentioned, there are two sides of the same coin.
Let me mention this. There's a myth that we hear from UGC, NAC, and AICT about teacher-student ratio, the faculty-student ratio, FSR, and all that. And typically, the numbers that are thrown at us is 15, 12, and ideally 10. Those sort of ratios. Texas A&M is the largest system in the country today, in terms of student enrollment in that country. Typically, if correct me if I'm wrong, typically the large state university systems, most of them are fantastic universities in terms of quality, research, ranking, blah, blah, all that stuff. Their ratios are between 18 and 20. IIT Kharagpur is almost like 18, 19, I believe. So student faculty ratio is a factor, depends on how you do it, how you deploy technology in operating systems, in how you automate your governance, and there's so many other issues. But somehow our country, the regulators only look at that number and put a big stamp that yes, no, go, etc. Okay, my next question. So at this juncture, we are at 5 o'clock. We started about 10-15 minutes behind schedule. Can we steal about 10 more minutes, spill over beyond 5? It is 5 o'clock now. Technically, but we did start late for reasons beyond our control. Okay, so we'll do a few quick questions. You have led study cohorts we talked about Brazil and Goa, very interesting selection of countries. Immediately some pictures, some things appear before you. Yeah, some connections and some scenes appear before your eyes. So what's your experience? This is like taking a cohort of students from Texas A&M, undergraduate students, and a couple of faculty members alongside, and you actually conduct a semester in that other country in an institute of choice. You did this in Goa, I know. I was there, but you also did multiple times, and others also did in Brazil. So please share, things that we should learn, also briefly.
So, first, the utilitarian side of study abroad. So a lot of students in Texas A&M, because we are in Texas, that's oil country. That's the energy capital of the world as we speak. Even looking at the geopolitical events of the last couple of days now. A lot of the students are aspiring for oil and gas jobs. A big majority of them in our engineering college. And a lot of these oil and gas companies actually prefer students who have an international experience. So for example, if you're working for Schlumberger, your first appointment is probably going to be Malaysia or some other country in US or in South America. So they prefer students who have demonstrated the skill.
Or Venezuela.
Or that's coming, I guess. so, so a lot of them, they prefer students who have demonstrated that they had the experience of staying outside their comfort zone and dealing with it. And of course, students who have been in the cozy system of, a US educational institution have not ventured beyond the boundaries of Texas or beyond the boundaries of US or Canada, are not necessarily the ideal students that they're looking for. So if a student has done a study abroad in Brazil or in Spain or in India, those are the students who have gone outside their comfort zone, lived in a different culture, and tried to learn from their experience. And that's the rich experience they bring to the interview table. And so study abroad, actually, Texas A&M is one of the biggest study abroad programs of all the engineering programs that are out there. In fact, Halliburton gave us a $5 million endowment, and we have a Halliburton Engineering Global Program, which actually under that umbrella, we conduct all the study abroad programs where we bring students from Texas A&M to different educational institutions, teach the same class that we were going to teach in Texas A&M. We teach it at the educational institution in a different country. And it's also a drinking from a fire hydrant, because what we normally teach in a 14-week semester, we teach it in 3 weeks or 5 weeks, essentially. So morning time, that the students are learning, a very focused, distilled course content. And afternoon, they're either going for a cultural excursion or industry visit. So for example, when we went to Brazil, Brazil actually makes the largest number of compressors that goes into your air conditioning system or refrigerators. So visit to a compressor manufacturing plant, for example, in the afternoon, or to go to a museum or go to a cultural place or a religious place. So it's a very holistic experience for the students, but at the same time, they're dealing with, no water in the bathroom, except for 6 to 8 in the morning or 10 to 12 at night, right? So learning how to deal with those situations, they actually, when they're interviewing, they're actually talking about those experiences, how they lived outside their comfort zone. And so it happens to be a very popular, opportunity for students there. So there's a huge demand. So for example, when I did the study abroad program in BITS Pilani, Goa, we had only 20 seats, 20 students that we could bring. And there were 100 students applying. And then we were getting angry emails. My girlfriend got admitted, I did not, and I'm terribly frustrated.
Imagine that happening in Goa.
Right. So it happens to be a very popular program. Thanks to BITS Pilani for hosting us, actually.
I think we had a few extra, 25, 27.
Yeah, I think it was 25 actually, yeah, instead of 20, as I mentioned. And we did that 2 or 3 times essentially until the pandemic started. But that, I think, is a crown jewel of the engineering program.
So if I recall correctly, the cultural experience, the vice chancellor's wife took them to some ethnic clothing store for the kurtas and the ghagras and whatever else. So all right.
Yep, and they had a really great time, doing the cultural excursion.
So the placement paradox. This is something I was surprised when I first learned this as a grad student. So in India, every institute, including the most well-known ones, IITs and all that, BITS and etc. We all organize, including Heritage. We all organize complete support for feeding the students with a job, organizing, bringing them, and all kinds of support systems. The students will be placed, and we brag about 100% placement in our marketing things and all that stuff, even though in some of them are actually not 100%. But in US, this is missing completely. The university or the institution is not responsible for getting a job to the student. It's not part of the promise or the guarantee they have. They believe in skilling, and they believe in the student making himself or herself presentable to the company. Sometimes there are career fairs and so on, but the way placement is done in this country is absolutely missing there. So what's it? The students, I think it's a tradition. The students don't have that expectation either. But I don't know how we inherited this in this country. An academic institution's job is to get jobs for the graduates, whereas in the US it's not.
Yes. So yeah, I don't think when we are admitting a student, we are guaranteeing jobs. That's their responsibility. They should be mature enough to figure out what skill sets they need to go to the particular profession of their choice. And I think in one sense, Texas A&M has a great geographical advantage. So if you look at Dallas, Austin, Houston, Dallas is or Houston is the energy capital. It's also the medtech capital. It's also the space capital because all the NASA launches are controlled by the Houston Control Center of NASA. Come again? Banking and finance, that's the other part, and on the other hand, Austin happens to be the high-tech capital. All the Intels and the Samsungs and the Nvidias are over there. There's a big migration of IT population from California to Austin right now because of the cost of living and all the other advantages that come with Austin. And then Dallas happens to be a big, Department of Defense, center with Bell helicopters and those kind of, Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and all those companies being there. So when we are graduating a mechanical engineer or electrical engineer, depending on which direction they want to go, defense, high tech, or oil and gas, or med tech, there is always a job there, right? So that actually, and mechanical engineering, I'm bragging a little bit, for my own profession, being so holistic, our graduates actually have a lot more option in terms of job prospects, and they're not just limited to an AI job, for example. So we don't promise any jobs, and it's up to them to decide which direction they want to build their career, where their aspirations are, where their passions are, and to take those courses that helps them, or do the study abroads that helps them to get into those particular professions. So I think it's a very confounded situation in if I compare it with the Indian situation here, because we don't really have that kind of an ecosystem, I would think. Except for heat exchangers, Pune being a big, heat exchanger ecosystem. But I can't think of a space ecosystem or a medtech ecosystem in one particular city, for example. So it's kind of difficult to compare the two in terms of the aspirations of the students and then the opportunities, essentially. But I would like to throw it back to you because when it comes to research, you converted BITS Pilani from a skill-oriented, institution to a more research, heavy institution. So I'm kind of wondering how you went about doing that.
Well, this cannot be done in a short time. It took several years, and the answer has to be a little longer than this. But let me attempt. You break it down. You first of all, this mandate was set by myself. My boss was somebody you probably know, Mr. Kumar Mangalam Villa. He didn't ask me to do this. So I immediately figured out this is something I want to do during my tenure. BITS Pilani has been a fabulous teaching university, globally well known. BITSians are doing fantastically in various countries for decades, but it was not doing sufficient amount of research. So my mandate was to set to myself was to convert it to transform it to a research university. So you break it down. What are the university functions? You look at, so how do you do that? You just don't look at research because the entire university has to work together to rise up to that challenge. So you break it down to academics. You do a strategic plan. People from business school will probably understand this better, I assume. You do a strategic plan. I did it for myself. Of course, you form a team, etc. But ultimately, you have to take a call. So you what are the basic university functions? Maybe half a dozen. Faculty, academics, research is a big one. Infrastructure, then alumni, internationalization, finance. Elephant in the room. And so on. So these are, alumni is a big one. If you have a sizable number of alumni out there who are eminent, stellar alumni. So I emphasized on all these functions. And then you figure out what So you basically strategic plan in my mind, I'm not a business school guy. In my mind, strategic plan means a very simple thing. Where are we today? Where do you want to be in number of years later? And the last one, how do you get there? Seems very simple, but it's excruciatingly hard, believe me, to do this. But there will be a lot of doubters, lot of negative, push and all that. Uh, Faculty promotion. You gradually are bringing the research element. You are changing goalposts, changing targets for faculty members, and all that stuff. So you become the worst villain in the organization. Let it be. See, as long you are pure in your agenda, which is the bottom line is the institute or the university or the organization, not you, the individual, not another person, etc. As long as that's pure, you don't have any other hidden agenda that I want to become famous, I want to create my own, greener pastures for beyond this job. If you don't have those dark stories, it works out. Believe me, it did work out in Westfield. And initially, I was very frustrated with a lot of negative pushback and all that stuff. But you always find, as a matter of fact, the most critical elements, those who are giving you the worst trouble, put them in committees. This is a strategy. Put them in committees, and once they assume, they recognize them, and then they start doing things for themselves because they are in the committee. How can that committee do badly? It seems very simple, but it works. And so on. So alumni, a lot of people ignore that, but you have to do things, you have to structure. So everywhere, just surface talk doesn't work. You got to create frameworks. I'm giving generic answers. Frameworks, scaffolds. How do you do it? These are the policy documents. All those things have to be done over the years. And then I remember I started with 1 crore per year was the total endowment for several years, for last 7 years when I took over from the alumni. When I finished, I think it was 25 crore per year. But the pathway has been created, so now it's exponentially jumping. Then
So you had a very enthusiastic alumni supporting that mission.
absolutely, this is important, and I wanted to comment on your previous response about study abroad program. So Heritage could think about bringing. So we always think about our students going overseas, spending a summer, etc., etc. But think about this: American students spending 6 weeks or 10 weeks over here. Calcutta's cultural experience, this immersion is fantastic. This could be an opportunity for Heritage. Even the name spreads, it becomes visible.
Because the students who come here eventually become your brand ambassadors and go and talk highly of Heritage.
Calcutta is a much more interesting location than many of the leading IITs, in some sense. So I think we are way behind time. I will skip some. I did have a few other interesting questions, but this is a fantastic experience for me. I don't know about you, but I just had a very short question, which is little silly, and he's going to be put in difficulty. So, what's the best career advice that you received from somebody significant? I'm sure you don't have to reveal who did you receive it from. That turned out to be completely wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my professors told me, why are you wasting time doing a PhD? You should do an MBA. Well, I did not do an MBA. But doing a PhD in retrospect has been a great choice.
Yeah, wonderful. So this is that full circle moment from this 92 spring semester classroom in Department of Mechanical Engineering building on IIT Kharagpur campus to this moment, this day. So we are looking at 22-year-olds today, like yourself way back, and probably pondering over the decision to go to the US or not, etc. So many things have changed since your time, and more importantly, these questions. I'm not asking you to respond to it, but these are questions that come to our mind always. What should we tell today's students? What is the right thing to do that we are not telling them yet, or at least we are not telling them loudly enough. what are those questions or comments or advices, etc. So thank you, Devajyoti. This is a wonderful. This will remain in my memory for a very, very long time. And I don't know. I wish we had the students here or a bigger audience, but this is that time of the year. It's sort of difficult to get people. But thank you so much. I thank CII, Eastern Region, and the entire Heritage leadership. Mr. Pradeep Agarwal, our CEO, personally he took up on this to make it happen. And Moshiki, Moshiki probably has left, and others who are still here for giving us lending your ears. Thank you so much.
Thank you.